All right, guys. Hockey starts tomorrow. I'm really excited. Unfortunately for the Stars, we're not going to be starting for another week. But there's a triple header tomorrow. So I'm really excited. So we got to get this last video done. Today we're going to talk about the Canadian division, the North division they're calling it. And this is the most interesting division out of the four, I think. It's going to be the most competitive, and I'm sure our friends up north are really going to love this division and the rivalries it's going to bring. Let's go check out. Okay, guys, so let's go ahead and start with the obvious one. Number 7 is going to be the Ottawa Senators. Now, the Ottawa Senators had a great offseason. They had a couple players that they took in the draft, which is really going to bump them up with their rebuild after drafting Tim Stützle at 3 and then Jake Sanderson at 5. But they still have a long way to go before they're even, considered playoff contenders making the playoffs. So they do have one of the best prospect pools in the NHL. And then on top of that, they did add some decent pieces in the offseason. So they signed Florida Panther Evgeny Dadonov from Florida, and he's now playing in Ottawa. And now they've also got Austin Watson from Nashville, Alex Galchenyuk from Minnesota, Joshua Brown, and Eric Goodbranson. So, some names that are recognizable, or they're not like, who is that? But they did make some good moves in the offseason. And then, of course, their big one is their trade for Matt Murray from Pittsburgh. And Pittsburgh, knowing that they were going to have to make a trade so that Seattle didn't take one of their two good goaltenders, and they decided to go with Tristan Jarry. So now Jarry is the starter in Pittsburgh, and Matt Murray now has a new $6.25 annual $1 million contract for 4 years. So I don't know. We'll see what the two-time Stanley Cup champion does in Canada's capital. And even though that Sens fans have been frustrated for the last couple of years, especially after almost making the Stanley Cup final, it wasn't even like 4 or 5 years ago, I think. It's starting to bear fruit, their rebuild. So we'll see how it goes, and I've got Ottawa at 7 as the obvious pick. All right, guys, so for the remaining 6 teams, is very difficult because all 6 teams can kind of make an argument as to why they should make the playoffs in this division. It's going to be very competitive. And I went back and forth on this for a long time. It's going to be a fun division to watch, especially to keep track of. But and again, this was hard, but I had to make a decision one way or another. So at number 6, I've got Vancouver, and Vancouver is here at number 6 for a couple reasons. Okay, their rebuild seemed to end this year after they made it to the playoffs. They beat the Minnesota Wild in the qualifying round. They upset the St. Louis Blues. They were able to push Vegas all the way to a Game 7 when it was actually the Vancouver Demkos versus the Vegas Golden Knights. But in this offseason, they lost 3 big players. They lost Jacob Markstrom, Chris Tanev, and Tyler Toffoli. Now, Jacob Markstrom is going to hurt a little bit for Vancouver fans, but they did go out and get Braden Holtby to try and fulfill that role. Now, Holtby does have a cup ring on his resume that Jacob Markstrom doesn't have, so maybe we'll see something good from him. And obviously, Demko is tagged as the goalie of the future, so Demko can definitely learn something from Holtby, and Holtby can help teach him to show him how to play correctly in the NHL and help Vancouver win a cup. And then obviously Chris Tanev, he left to Calgary along with Markstrom, and Chris Tanev was a very good top 4 defenseman, and from what I've seen online, he was a very beloved defenseman in Vancouver. But however, they did get Nate Schmidt to come in and fulfill that role, hopefully, and they got him at a steal by just giving Vegas a 3rd-round pick because Vegas was in cap hell. So that's a very good defenseman that they added, even though they did lose Chris Tanev. Now, I actually think that's an upgrade, so that's awesome for Vancouver. Now, the thing that they did lose is they lost Tyler Toffoli. Now, Tyler Toffoli seemed to do very well after he came over in the deadline from the LA Kings, and he seemed to fit well in Vancouver. They didn't really go out in the offseason and go and get anybody that could fulfill that role. Now, I have seen that maybe Hoglander, who is one of the rookies for Vancouver, is playing a lot on the second line. So maybe Hoglander can kind of fulfill that role that Tyler Toffoli did for the Vancouver Canucks. However, I just don't see them being a playoff team in this specific division. If they were in the Pacific, I might see them making the playoffs, but I've got them at 6 in the Canadian division. So at number 5, I've got the Calgary Flames. And the Calgary Flames got through the Jets in the qualifying round, but they lost to the Dallas Stars in 6 games. And they were very close. They were 12 seconds away from going up 3-1 in their series against the Stars. But thanks to Joe Pavelski, they evened the series, and obviously the rest is history. The Stars marched on to the Stanley Cup final. Now, their general manager, Brad Treliving, was not very happy with the outcome of the playoffs there. So even though they lost TJ Brody and he moved on, they did get Chris Tanev, just like I mentioned, from Vancouver. And then also on top of that, they also got Markstrom from Vancouver. So that's already 2 former Canucks that are playing for the Calgary Flames now. And Markstrom is going in to replace Cam Talbot. That is definitely an upgrade. Cam Talbot is an okay number 1 goaltender, but Markstrom is definitely an upgrade, and he will be a much better elite goaltender alongside David Riddick. Now, they also actually, I forgot to mention this as well, is that Josh Lavo coming from Vancouver as well. So it was like a party from Vancouver to Calgary. There was like a train going, I guess. Now, all these additions are great and everything, and they all look good on paper. But the biggest thing that this team is missing is they're not getting a lot of production from their core 4 up front in Sean Monahan, Johnny Gaudreau, Elias Lindholm, and Matthew Tkachuk. Now, there have been the rumors about Johnny Gaudreau this entire offseason about him possibly being traded, maybe even Sean Monahan. Matthew Tkachuk, there hasn't really been any rumors about him going anywhere, but he didn't put up the necessary production that he was expected. And then Elias Lindholm also suffered a lot. So that's the biggest question I have with this team is their scoring. They've got the defense, it seems like. It seems like they've also got the goaltending that they've backstopped now, and they've upgraded with Markstrom. But the question is that core 4 players, those 4 guys, are they going to score enough goals in order to make this team a playoff team? And I just don't see it. There's just too many questions. Maybe Dylan Dubé and Sam Bennett kind of step up and fulfill more of those roles, and maybe they take some of those top 6 roles away from some of those other players, but we'll see. I don't know. Maybe Mangiapane jumps up and does more in this season and scores more points. But for me, I've got the Calgary Flames missing the playoffs at number 5. All right, so I've got those 3 teams missing the playoffs. So I've got Calgary at 5, Vancouver at 6, and Ottawa at 7, which is the easy pick. Now, here's where it gets even more interesting. I think maybe 3 and 4 are almost interchangeable between these two. But at number 4, I've got the Winnipeg Jets. Now, the Winnipeg Jets have always been missing that number 2 center spot. Somebody to play with Patrick Laine, because Patrick Laine is not getting those first-line minutes like he wants. So they're trying to keep him happy so that maybe they won't have to trade him sometime soon and, start all those trade rumors with Columbus, with Pierre-Luc Dubois, because they're both unhappy with where they are. But this team has a lot of their forward depth does not look bad. You got Kyle Connor, you got Mark Scheifele. He's on my fantasy team. I hope he puts up big numbers. And then you've also got Blake Wheeler, who may be getting close to the end of his career, but he's still a very good, first-line option for the right wing side. And then, obviously, when you've got the best goaltender, arguably, in the world, and Connor Hellebuck, that doesn't hurt either. So not only along with him, but Brossoit was decent for them this year. So that same tandem, kind of gets them in, and I think that's the only reason why they were even close to getting into the qualifying rounds. So, but their biggest question, obviously, is their defense, because obviously the departure of Bufflin doesn't seem like he's going to play anymore, and then they traded Jacob Trouba away. Now, Neil Pionk is a great defenseman. He's one of the most underrated defensemen. He's still growing. He's still learning. He's a young guy, so he's only going to get better from here on out. But I think he's a very capable number one defenseman. But I still think he needs somebody to play with, and they need to bolster their defense a little bit more. And also, I would be dumb to not mention Josh Morrissey. Josh Morrissey is also a very good defensive defenseman who kind of bolsters his blue line as well. But that's a big question for me with Winnipeg, and so I've got them at number 4. All right, so let's talk about the winners of the offseason, arguably, the Montreal Canadiens. I've got them at number 3. So from the flip side of the Canucks, it looks like the Canucks had a bad offseason. They had a great offseason. So we'll see how all of this kind of pans out, but they made a bunch of moves this offseason. So they traded Max Domi for Josh Anderson, and then they gave him a huge extension, which I am very kind of about. I don't think he should have been signed for that term and that money, but I don't know. Maybe Mark Bergevin sees something in him that I don't, and I hope he's right for his sake, because his job seems to be on the line right now. But also on top of that, he was able to go out and get Tyler Toffoli, kind of like I mentioned, from Vancouver. And he inked him for a 4-year deal worth about $4.25 million annually. And both of those guys are capable of top 6 minutes. So on defense, the Canadiens also traded for Joel Edmondson's rights from the Carolina Hurricanes. And then also, along with Kaprizov, Romanov has been one of the most talked about prospects coming in this season that wasn't in this draft class, in the 2020 draft class. So he's a defenseman, and Alexander Romanov seems to be a lock for this roster. And obviously anything to help Carey Price play less games and be more healthy for when the playoffs start, assuming they do make the playoffs, which is what I've got them at, number 3. Don't prove me wrong, Montreal. They went out and got Jake Allen from the St. Louis Blues. So they are paying a lot of money for him right now, just because he was a number 1 goaltender in St. Louis for a while before Bennington came along. But he is a very good backup goaltender, maybe even a 1A, 1B situation. Obviously, he's no Carey Price, but he can, if something happens to Carey Price, he can definitely step in and take over that net and be able to help this team continue on. And then, not to mention, look at their roster. It's fantastic. I'm just going to throw names out there. Philip Deneau, Nick Suzuki. Is he going to be better this year after a great playoffs? Jesperi Kotkaniemi. Is he going to have a great playoffs? Thomas Tatar, Brendan Gallagher, Joel Armia, Lehkonen. Lehkonen was pretty good for them this past year too. And then I would be terrible if I didn't mention Shea Weber, and he continues to be a beast, and then Jeff Petrie. So this team looks stacked, which is why I'm kind of scared to pick them at number 3. Maybe it all goes down the toilet, and I'm wrong. But I really hope that they do well. I've got Montreal at number 3. So that means at number 2, I have the Toronto – no, I'm just kidding. I have the Edmonton Oilers. And the Edmonton Oilers I've got here, and I know there's a lot of questions behind them, not just with their defense, but also with their goaltending. But when you've got Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, I think Connor McDavid is sick of losing, and he's sick of all of these awkward playoff rounds that he has in his resume right now. And that includes their qualifying round loss to the Chicago Blackhawks, and who were the lowest seed in the West last year. So they did go out and they did add a couple of players. They added Kyle Turris, who never really worked in Nashville, so he's going to be the number 3 center. Dominic Cahoon, I actually have him on my fantasy team as well because I think he may have some chances to go play with either Draisaitl or McDavid and get a lot of points that way. And then also Puljujarvi returns to the Edmonton Oilers after a 1-year hiatus in the country of Finland. He's only 22, and I think he may start this season on the third line, but I think maybe if there's an injury in their top 6 that they get an opportunity for him to kind of push his way up there. I would like to see him score more because he's such a highly rated prospect, but we'll see how that goes. So even though their forward group, again, looks improved and it looks better, they took a huge hit with the announcement that Oscar Klefbom is not going to be playing this entire season. He was their number 1 defenseman, and I think it says here that he played 25 minutes and 25 seconds of average ice time per game. That is a ton of hockey to try and replace. So I guess Darnell Nurse kind of steps up, maybe Ethan Bear also. So we'll have to see what happens there. And then I really think that they went after Jacob Markstrom and tried to entice Jacob Markstrom to come to Edmonton. But they weren't able to do that, so they went ahead and re-signed Mike Smith to another year. And then they've also got Mikko Koskinen. So, it didn't really work last year. So my thing is that if their offense is not potent enough to kind of push them through games, if Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl don't pull this team kicking, dragging, and screaming across the finish line to this second spot, I mean, I don't know. We'll see. But I think they can do it. So I've got Edmonton at 2. So that means at number 1, I've got the Toronto Maple Leafs. And no, it's not just because they get so much media attention up in Canada. And, not just in Canada, but down here in the States too, especially in the northern states. They get a ton of media publicity. But they just did so much to this roster to completely change everything about what this roster looks like. They made some huge additions, and they just look like a harder team to play against. So first off, what they did is they went out and they signed the Calgary Flames defenseman TJ Brody. So TJ Brody played with the number 1 defenseman for Calgary, Mark Giordano, and it looks like he's going to do that with Morgan Riley in Toronto. So they also added Zach Bogosian, who was a very good third-pairing defenseman in Tampa Bay. After winning the Cup, he signs here in Toronto. So maybe we can see him win back-to-back Cups. Let's see, what else? So on top of also signing Bogosian, they also went out and signed Wayne Simmons because they wanted to be a tougher team to play against. So Wayne Simmons is also on a 1-year deal, and it seems like they're putting all their eggs in the basket this year, and they're going for it this year. And then, obviously, probably the biggest – well, no, it is the biggest one out of any of the signings they did is they signed Joe Thornton. And anytime you have a veteran of his caliber, of his resume, of his leadership, you really can't count him out. And the funny thing is it looks like he's playing first-line minutes with Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner. So, go figure. And then, other signings include Jimmy Vesey, Travis Boyd, Mikko Lehtinen. They added Aaron Dell. They added, I think they added Michael Hutchinson back. So, their goaltending is stacked. They got 4 capable goaltenders just in case something happens. And then, obviously, they've got their top prospect, Nick Robertson, who will look to kind of come into this core and be a part of this core. And then, obviously, you've got all the guys up front for Toronto. I mean, Matthews, Marner, Nylander, Tavares, Alexander Kerfoot, all these guys. And this just looks like a team that is ready to win now. And with all these 1-year deals that they're handing out to these older players, I think this is it. And honestly, if as a Stars fan, I really want to see Joe Thornton win the Cup. I really want to see him because he doesn't have much time. This may be his last year. I think it is. So I think he's got one more chance to win, along with Jason Spezza, by the way. So a former star there. So this is more of like an emotional kind of number one choice for being the top seed in the Canadian division. But I'd really love to see Toronto be the number one team in the Canadian division. All right, so that's it. Hockey starts tomorrow. So let me know what you think in the comments section down below. Please make sure you hit like and subscribe for more daily content from this channel. Yes, we are a Stars podcast / YouTube channel, but we also talk about anything hockey related, especially NHL. So hockey tomorrow. We'll see you guys on the flip side.